Mount Etna's lava flow is fading, its most advanced front now frozen around 2,600 meters up the mountain. That should be good news. It is not. In the same days that the lava weakened, the explosions at the Voragine crater intensified. A new source of infrasound appeared beneath the summit, and the volcanic tremor climbed into its high range. The energy did not leave the volcano. It changed direction. And I am going to show you why that shift puts far more people at risk than the lava ever did. Mount Etna began erupting again on the 26th of June. For the first few days, it behaved exactly the way you would expect Europe's largest volcano to behave when it wakes up on its eastern flank. It poured lava. Molten rock opened out of a fracture system near the Voragine summit crater, close to 3,300 meters up, nearly 10,000 feet above the sea, and it ran downslope into the high valleys on the mountain's eastern side. It was slow, it was visible, it was, in the language volcanologists use without flinching, trackable. And then, over the following days, the eruption did something that should concern you far more than a river of lava ever could. The lava started to fade. And as it faded, the explosions at the summit began to grow. This is a channel that covers the planet when it shakes, erupts, floods, and burns. And if there is one instinct I want to correct today, it is the one that says a shrinking lava flow means a calming volcano. On Etna, right now, the opposite appears to be true. Roughly 900,000 people live in the zones that Italy's National Geophysics and Volcanology Institute considers exposed to this mountain's hazards. And what those instruments are recording is not a volcano winding down. It is a volcano changing its mind about how it wants to release its energy. For the first day or so, the numbers read like a routine Etna flow. By the 27th of June, the lava had traveled about 630 meters. It covered something like 18,000 square meters of ground, roughly 4.5 acres, and the total volume that had come out was estimated at about 45,000 cubic meters. Call it 1.6 million cubic feet of rock. The most advanced front of that flow sat high on the mountain, around 2,620 meters up, about 8,600 feet above sea level. None of that is unusual for this volcano. Etna produces flows like this the way other mountains produce weather. Then the trend reversed. Over the following days, the effusive part of the eruption, the actual outpouring of lava, began to weaken. Thermal cameras that had been reading the bright heat of a moving flow started to see only a faint, cooling glow in the upper valley, the kind of residual warmth you get from lava that is no longer being fed from below. On its own, that reading would tell you the eruption was ending, but it did not come on its own. At the very same time, the explosive activity at the Voragine crater was getting stronger. The strombolian bursts, the rhythmic cannon-like explosions that throw glowing rock above the vent, intensified. Gas pressure climbed, and by the 1st of July, the volcanic tremor, the continuous underground vibration that tells scientists how much energy is moving through the plumbing, had climbed into its high range with its source sitting beneath the Voragine crater at around 3,000 meters. Here is why that combination matters so much. A lava flow that fades while the explosions grow is not an eruption that is running out of energy. It is an eruption that is rerouting its energy. The magma is no longer bleeding out slowly and quietly as flowing rock. It is being redirected into the one pathway that does its damage fast, the explosive one. Think of it like a pressure system with two release valves. One valve lets the pressure out gently, as a slow ooze of lava down a slope. The other lets it out violently, as blasts of gas and shattered rock at the summit. What the instruments are describing is the gentle valve closing, while the violent one opens wider. That is not the same volcano doing less. That is the same volcano choosing a more dangerous way to unload. And there is a reason that trade points toward more danger rather than less. Effusive eruptions are what you get when magma reaches the surface having already lost much of its gas, so it simply flows. Explosive eruptions are what you get when magma still holds its gas as it rises, so that gas expands and shatters the rock on the way out. A volcano trading the first behavior for the second is usually a volcano being fed by magma that has not yet given up its gas. In other words, fresher magma from lower down, which is exactly what the darkening ash independently suggests. The clearest single clue in this entire event is a change of color. When the explosions at Voragine first began throwing ash, that ash was described as relatively light, a brownish tone. To a volcanologist, brown ash usually means something almost reassuring. The volcano is clearing its throat, blasting out old, cold rock that was already sitting inside the vent. That material is called lithic, and it is essentially rubble. It tells you the vent is being cleared. It does not tell you that new magma has arrived. Then the ash darkened. It shifted toward a dark gray. And dark gray ash is a different message entirely. When fresh magma rises fast enough and gets torn apart by expanding gas on its way out, the fragments it produces are dark and glassy, what scientists call juvenile material, meaning newly arrived from below rather than recycled from the vent walls. The shift from brown to gray is, in plain terms, the difference between a volcano coughing up old debris and a volcano fragmenting brand new magma as it climbs toward the surface. That is the tell. That is the observation that turns this from a fading lava flow into something that holds the full attention of the people who watch this mountain for a living. Because if fresh magma is now reaching shallow levels beneath the summit, then the fading of the surface lava is not the eruption ending. It is the eruption reloading. I want to be careful here, because this is where it is easy to overstate. A color change in ash is not a countdown clock. It does not guarantee what happens next. But it is a physically real, measurable signal, and it points in a specific direction, toward new magma, toward more gas, toward a more explosive style of eruption. When you line it up next to the rising tremor and the strengthening blasts, the ash color stops looking like a detail and starts looking like a pattern. A single dark cloud might be noise. A dark cloud arriving at the same time as climbing tremor and stronger explosions is a message, and the message is that something fresh is moving up inside the mountain. It is worth understanding why color works as a gauge at all. Ash is simply rock blasted into fragments too small to see one at a time, and the source of those fragments changes what you see from a distance. Old vent rock, oxidized and weathered, throws a paler, browner cloud. Fresh magma, quenched and shattered while it is still molten, throws a darker, glacier one. Reading the color is therefore a crude but genuine way of asking one question from miles away. Is this old rock being cleared, or new magma arriving? Around the 1st of July, the instruments picked up something they had not been recording before, a new infrasonic source underneath the already active crater. Infrasound is sound too low for human ears, long, slow pressure waves that roll out through the air when something explodes. For a volcano, infrasound is a fingerprint. Every explosive burst at the vent stamps the atmosphere with a pressure signal, and by listening to those signals, scientists can tell how often the volcano is exploding and how forcefully. The important word there is new. A fresh infrasonic source appearing in the middle of an ongoing eruption is not the sound of a system settling into a steady rhythm. It is the sound of a system reorganizing itself, opening a new explosive pathway, or intensifying an existing one, beneath a crater that was already venting. Put the pieces in order, and the sequence tells its own story. First came the fractures on the flank, then came lava out of those fractures. Then the tremor began to climb. Then the explosions grew stronger. Then the ash went dark. And then a new explosive source announced itself in the infrasound. Every one of those steps, taken alone, is something Etna does on an ordinary bad week. It is the order they arrived in and the direction they all point that changes the reading. This is not the signature of a volcano relaxing. It is the signature of a volcano building. Each measurement, the tremor, the gas, the infrasound, the ash, is independently saying the same thing. And when independent instruments all lean the same way, scientists stop treating it as random noise and start treating it as a trend. No single one of these readings would be enough to raise an eyebrow. All of them together, arriving in this order, are why the people who monitor this volcano are paying very close attention right now. It also says something about how modern volcano monitoring actually works. No one is standing at the rim making a judgment call by eye. Instead, a network of seismometers, microphones tuned below human hearing, gas sensors, and thermal and radar instruments watches the mountain around the clock. And the real science lives in the places where several of those independent tools happen to agree. Etna is one of the most heavily instrumented volcanoes on the planet, which is exactly why a change this subtle gets caught in the first place, days before it would ever be obvious from a town below. Let me put the central point as plainly as I can. On this mountain, right now, less visible lava does not mean less danger. It may mean more. When a volcano pours lava, the hazard is relatively easy to understand and relatively easy to live with. You watch where the flow goes. It moves slowly. It threatens whatever is downhill, and it spares everything that is not. An explosive summit phase is a different kind of threat with a different kind of geography. It does not creep along one valley. It throws material up and lets the wind decide where it lands. The moment Etna's energy shifts from flowing rock to summit explosions, the question you have to ask changes completely. It stops being where is the lava going, and it becomes where is the ash going, how high is the column climbing, and what is falling out of it. That is the real reason the fading flow is not good news. The energy did not leave. It changed address. And the new address, a fragmenting gas-charged column of fresh magma at the summit, is capable of a far larger footprint than any lava flow this eruption has produced. A slow flow endangers a hillside. An ash column endangers everything downwind of it, in every direction the wind can turn. This is the single most counterintuitive thing about the current situation. And it is the thing most likely to be missed by someone glancing at a headline. A photograph of a shrinking lava flow looks like relief. The data sitting underneath that photograph looks like the opposite. The institute that monitors Etna is blunt about this in its own hazard language. It warns that the volcano can produce frequent explosive activity at its summit craters, ash clouds, coarse fallout, summit lava emissions, and that it can escalate quickly toward more energetic activity. It states plainly that the collapse of part of a summit cone, which could generate a pyroclastic flow, cannot be excluded. And it repeats, in the flattest possible language, that during active phases, the hazard is never zero. Those are not dramatic words chosen for effect. They are the standing description of what this mountain is capable of, and everything the instruments have recorded over the past week and a half fits neatly inside that description. So where is this going? Honestly, the data have not decided yet, and that unresolved question is the center of this whole story. There are two branches in front of Etna right now. On one branch, everything I have just described is the opening act of a paroxysm, the technical name for one of Etna's violent escalations. In a paroxysm, the Strombolian bursts you are seeing now intensify and merge into sustained lava fountaining, a continuous jet of molten rock hundreds of meters high, and that fountaining feeds a tall ash column that can climb into the flight paths of aircraft and rain tephra downwind for miles. Etna has done this many times. Its paroxysms are known precisely because they can escalate over hours, not weeks. The tremor, the gas, the infrasound, and the juvenile ash we are watching are exactly the kind of precursors that sometimes, or not always, come before one. On the other branch, the volcano is simply settling. The lava is genuinely fading, the weak thermal reading is exactly what it looks like, and the explosions calm back down into the background grumbling that Etna produces most of the time. This is a real possibility, and any scientist worth trusting will tell you so. Volcanoes flirt with escalation and then back away from it all the time. Most restless spells do not become paroxysms. The uncomfortable part is not that we do not know which branch. It is the timing. If Etna takes the violent branch, the transition can complete faster than a warning can travel down the mountain. Every instrument is currently leaning the same way. Lava down, tremor up, infrasound new, ash darker, magma probably fresh. But leaning is not the same as arriving. The volcano has not committed. It is standing at the fork, and the honest scientific position is that we are watching to see which way it steps, not announcing that it has already stepped. That is also why you should be wary of anyone who tells you, with total confidence, that a catastrophe is coming or that there is nothing here worth watching. Both of those certainties are wrong. The mountain is genuinely balanced between two outcomes, and the responsible thing is to hold both of them in mind at once while the instruments keep reporting. There is a second reason this shift deserves more weight than it might at another volcano, and it has to do with the ground the eruption is coming through. Before and during this activity, surveys of the summit, including drone flights over the crater area, mapped a summit that is structurally coming apart. They documented fresh fractures and older ones, detachment niches where blocks of the mountain have begun to pull away, pit craters, and zones where loose material has piled up under gravity. One single detachment area in the eastern to southeastern sector of the Voragine crater was measured at roughly 82,000 square meters, with a vertical drop of about 3 meters, nearly 10 feet, where one part of the summit has slipped down against another. This matters because the eruption is not issuing from a clean, stable pipe. It is issuing through a summit that is already failing. The weak, fracturing ground and the active vents are in the same place on the same side of the mountain. When you push rising magma and explosive pressure through rock that is already broken and already sliding, the range of things that can happen gets wider than it would at a structurally sound vent. That is the connection back to the main story. The shift toward explosivity is more concerning here precisely because it is happening through an edifice that is coming apart at exactly the spot where the action is. Now I have to be careful and honest about how far this goes, because this is where responsible analysis and internet panic part ways. Etna's entire eastern flank is known to creep slowly toward the sea over long stretches of time. Parts of it extend toward and under the Ionian Sea. In the far geological past, this same eastern side of the mountain has failed on a massive scale. A giant collapse that helped carve the great amphitheater on Etna's eastern face, and left its debris in deposits geologists still study today. If a large enough section of that flank ever failed again, and if part of that failure happened underwater, it could in principle push a tsunami into the surrounding coastline. I want to be absolutely clear about what that is and what it is not. That is a low probability, long-term structural hazard. It is not a forecast for this week, this eruption, or this year. I raise it only because the same weak eastern-southeastern sector that carries that long-term risk is the exact sector now fracturing and venting, which is why the current deformation is worth noting rather than dismissing, and why scientists keep such a close watch on this particular side of this particular mountain. The point is not that the flank is about to fall. The point is that the eruption is happening in the one place on Etna where the ground is least willing to hold still. Step back from the instruments for a moment and look at who lives underneath all of this. Etna is the largest volcano in Europe by area, covering something like 1,000 square kilometers, roughly 460 square miles. Around 900,000 people live in the zones considered exposed to its hazards. This is not a remote mountain in an empty place. It has towns on its flanks, an international airport at its foot, and farmland running up its lower slopes. For those people, the shift from lava to explosions is not an abstract change in eruptive style. It is a change in what can actually reach them. A lava flow high on the mountain threatens almost no one directly. An explosive summit phase can put ash on roads and rooftops across whole towns, ground aircraft at the airport below, and drop lapilli and larger volcanic bombs closer to the summit. And in the Institute's own words, the collapse of part of a summit cone, which could generate a fast-moving pyroclastic flow, cannot be excluded. That is the scenario that turns a spectacle into an emergency, and it is exactly the kind of outcome that becomes more plausible when the eruption turns explosive and the summit is already unstable. There is a human wrinkle to this that is worth naming. Etna's glowing summit has become a backdrop for photographs, for videos, and at times even for live music performed with the eruption lit up behind the stage. The gap between Etna as scenery and Etna as hazard is a real danger because it draws people toward restricted zones for a better view during exactly the kind of sudden Strombolian bursts that have sent visitors running in the past. When a volcano can shift in hours, standing near the summit for a photograph is a gamble against a clock you cannot see. I should also address the theories that always circulate when a famous volcano acts up, because you have probably seen them. One claim says an eruption like this must have been triggered or engineered by some piece of human technology. The energy required to move magma through a mountain this size is so far beyond anything people can produce that the idea falls apart on the physics alone. A second, more reasonable-sounding suspicion says the authorities are keeping the alert level low to protect tourist season. The honest answer is that alert levels are tied to specific monitoring thresholds rather than to how dramatic the eruption looks, that the monitoring data is published openly, and that the never-zero framing is the whole reason exclusion zones stay in place even when the official level is not at its peak. The tension people feel is real. The cover-up is not. We watched a version of this exact reading play out only days ago on the other side of the world, when a different volcano's changing ash color and unstable flank became the whole story. The tools transfer directly from one mountain to the next. Watch the color of what comes out. Watch whether the ground is holding, and do not confuse a quieter surface for a safer one. So, what should you actually watch for in the hours and days ahead? The scientists monitoring Etna are watching a short list of specific signals, and you can watch the same ones. The first is the tremor, whether that underground vibration keeps climbing or starts to fall back. The second is the infrasound, whether the explosive pulses become more frequent and more powerful, or fade. The third is the ash itself, whether it stays dark and juvenile, which points to continuing fresh magma, and how high the column climbs. The fourth is the ground, any sign that the fracturing and deformation on the eastern-southeastern sector is accelerating. And the fifth is the official alert level and the size of the exclusion zone, which is the clearest signal that the people with the best data have changed their assessment. The reason this particular eruption is worth staying with is the timing problem I keep returning to. The change is already underway. The lava is already fading. The explosions are already stronger. The ash has already darkened, and the infrasound has already picked up a new source. Etna is not a volcano that gives long notice. Its history says that when it commits to the violent branch, it can go from what we are seeing now to full lava fountaining and a towering ash column in a matter of hours. That means the warning window, if the volcano takes that path, may be very short. By the time an ash column is tall enough to see from the towns below, the mountain has already made its decision. None of this is a prediction that Etna is about to produce a catastrophe. It may well settle. The most likely outcomes for any given Etna eruption remain the ordinary ones. Some ash, some disruption, some spectacular footage, and then a return to quiet. But the specific combination of signals on the mountain right now is the combination that sometimes precedes something bigger, and it is arriving through a summit that is physically breaking. That is why this one is worth watching rather than scrolling past. Here is what will actually resolve it. Either the tremor, the gas, the infrasound, and the dark ash keep building, and Etna tips into a stronger explosive phase, or they ease off and the mountain steps back from the fork. We will likely know which within days, not weeks, because that is the speed this volcano operates at. Until then, the honest summary is the one the instruments are giving us. The lava is down, the explosions are up, the magma is probably fresh, and Europe's largest volcano has quietly become more dangerous at exactly the moment it looked like it was calming down. Keep your eyes on the summit. This is not over.